So the second section of this mantra, all is Brahman of the Upanishads, may I not negate Brahman, and may Brahman not negate me. These three sentences, in these three sentences are found the seeds of the three yogas as we have been discussing in our previous sessions. The first sentence has the seeds of Jnana Yoga, Yoga of knowledge, Yoga of wisdom. The second sentence has the seed of Karma Yoga, the yoga in which action is performed in such a way so that it leads to a meditative state. We have discussed this section also in great detail. And then the third section, may Brahman not negate me, may that divine not negate me, which is a prayer. And asks, in other words, for blessing, for grace. And therefore it has the seeds of Bhakti Yoga. It has the seeds of devotion in it. And as part of this discussion, in the previous session, I have already talked a lot about the understanding of Bhakti and how it is central to the path, essential to the path of yoga. It won't be an exaggeration to state that Bhakti, devotion, and as I said, that devotion is not really the proper translation. The proper translation is simply supreme love. Is the most influential spiritual practice in India, at least for over the past 1,500 years. Historically, it has been really the most dominant and the most influential and the most widely accepted, widely practiced aspect of yoga. In fact, what is known today as Santa Mata, the view or the opinions of the saints by which is understood, all the saints of the medieval times who gave their teachings in the vernacular languages of different parts of this country, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, which is in South India, to Tamil Nadu, to Kerala. In every state, there have been great saints, sages, masters within the last 1,000 years who gave songs, teachings in the local languages, in the languages of the people. And the essence of these languages, these teachings, lies in bhakti, in devotion, in the devotional aspect. I think the most, why was it so widely practiced, why was it so widely influential, was that it was an all-embracing tradition, a tradition which anyone and everyone could practice. It did not shut out anyone. The teachings were in such a way, and in fact, it favored more the lowest of the low and the weakest of the weak of the society to strengthen, to lift them up. And that is why its appeal to the ground level, to the common people of this country over the past, say, the past 1,500 years. And now I'm not getting into the traditional dating system, but the modern historical dating system of India, which is accepted by modern scholars. But this doesn't mean that the Bhakti tradition is only this old. I'm just speaking about when it became most influential throughout the country. Because there are extremely ancient historical evidence, such as, for example, a beautiful evidence that is there is Heliodorus' pillar in central India, in a city called Vidisha. And this was approximately erected, I think, in 113 or 120 BC, so that's approximately 2,200 years old. And it was erected by Heliodorus, who was a Greek ambassador to one of the Shunga kings, Bhagabhadra. And in this, Heliodorus refers to himself he uses an adjective which has been central to the devotional traditions, Bhagavata. Even today, a devotee is referred to as Parama Bhagavata, the great devotee of Bhagavan. Bhagavata means a devotee of Bhagavan, a devotee of the divine. And the fact that a Greek ambassador to an Indian kingdom erects this stone pillar and leaves an inscription on it in which he refers to him, and it's a Sanskrit inscription, Heliodorena Parama Bhagavatena, Heliodorus, the Bhagavata, the devotee of Bhagavan. And he precisely uses the same designation, Bhagavata, for himself, which many later scholars have used for yoga, for Sankhya. So, for example, when I often speak of the Jaina yoga master Haribhadra and his commentators, when they refer to Sankhya, when they refer to yoga, they refer to it as Bhagavata. So again, the same adjective has been used by him, and it's not only an interesting coincidence, but it shows that from extreme antiquity, at a time when India was extremely closed, in the sense that any spiritual master who interacted with the foreign invaders, who were seen as foreign invaders, were really, excommunicated from the society. And you can see this, for example, when Alexander, he came to India and he wanted to meet he came as a conqueror. And when he wanted to meet some of the saints and sages here, most of them said, no, we are not going to meet. And one or two of them actually met him. And one even went back with him, traveled back with him for quite a long way. But both of these, the one that went back with him and the one who agreed to meet him, were practically completely excommunicated from the society. That was the kind of what the Greeks referred to as the gymnosophists, as the naked gymnosophists, which are referred to with tremendous respect, and their lifestyle is exactly the same what we see the lifestyle of a muni. And yet, even in that time, to find someone, a Greek ambassador to India, proudly declaring himself Bhagavata, as a devotee of Bhagavan, as a devotee of, specifically of Vishnu, of Vasudeva, who he has mentioned in the inscription of the pillar, shows that even in extreme antiquity, every person, every individual was completely welcomed into the devotional traditions, and throughout the centuries, this has been the strength of the devotional traditions, that they have always focused on the lowest of the low, on the weakest of the weak, on those who were unaccepted by the society, and uplifted them by inspiring them to follow the devotional path, and brought them to a level of respect that many individuals, such as, for example, Ravidas, who was a shoemaker, who was doing the dirtiest work that somebody could do in ancient Indian society, to remove the hides, to pull away the hides of dead animals and make shoes out of it. Yet, he is one of the greatest saints and sages of medieval times. And it was not that he stopped doing his work. While doing his work, still he becomes the master of other great saints, such as Mirabai, for example. Mirabai, the great female devotee and one of the greatest female poetess of Hindi literature. He becomes her master. So like this, every aspect of every individual of the society was completely, it was an all-embracing tradition. That was its strength. As I've been talking of this inscription by Heliodorus, just a passing remark, which might be a digression, but at the conclusion, what he says is that at the conclusion of his inscription, that there are 3 steps that lead towards immortality, and if someone practices them wholeheartedly, then he enters heaven. He says that there are 3 things. First one is self-control, which is what we acquire through the practice of yoga. The second thing is jaga, which is the Sanskrit word tyaga, which means renunciation, but in his context, it is explained as in the sense of charity, giving to others. That is the second thing. And the third thing, absence of negligence. And I think again, the Mahabharata, one of the key teachings of Mahabharata is, if there is death, then it exists in form of negligence. I think negligence is the biggest problem. The more I personally even grapple with it, there is so much, we think we know ourselves, but the more we explore ourselves, the more we try to understand ourselves through the eyes of others, we actually realize that how little of our behavior, the way we speak, the way we act, how little we are in fact aware of what we sometimes do. And that's why sometimes we need others to challenge us, to tell us where the mistake has happened. So this absence of negligence, again, a goal of yoga, to remove these 3 things which lie at the concluding remark of Heliodorus' inscription, is a very interesting one. In any case, coming back to the discussion that we were having, that this Bhagavata tradition sees and particularly refers to the 2 very important aspects of the divine. One aspect is the ruler aspect, which one can find in all religions, that consciousness is the supreme ruler. But the second aspect, which is even more beautiful and of which I am not aware whether it has been so clearly defined like it has been defined in the Bhagavata traditions, and the traditions, there are several different traditions that it has inspired, is the madhurya aspect, is the sweetness aspect, the aspect of sweetness of the divine, which has been explored in these traditions. So, before I conclude, since I always like to look at everything from the perspective of the Hatha Yoga teachings, because ultimately what we are doing, asana here, is an aspect of Hatha Yoga. So in my last session, I talked about how Patanjali, the ancient master of yoga, refers to devotion in his teachings of the Yoga Sutras. Today I want to spend a little bit of time on how Hatha Yoga, and by Hatha Yoga now I mean specifically the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is a 14th century work on Hatha Yoga. I think the most important work on Hatha Yoga, most widely read work on Hatha Yoga today. Whenever I see texts on yoga being mentioned, Yoga Sutra comes at the forefront, and Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Swatma Rama's text. In fact, Guruji's Light on Yoga, his monumental work, as we saw yesterday, the title is inspired by Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, he chose Yoga Pradipa. And Yoga Pradipa, Light on Yoga, is just the translation of Yoga Pradipa. If you look at the Sanskrit title of his work, it is Yoga Pradipa, a shorter. Yoga Pradipa means lamp on yoga. And Swatma Rama's work was Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which means a tiny little lamp, a small little lamp on Hatha Yoga. So, and Guruji used to refer to Hatha Yoga Pradipika quite often in his teachings. So I would just have a look at how Hatha Yoga Pradipika and its commentators include the devotional aspect into Hatha Yoga. Generally, an aspect which is not spoken of when we speak of Hatha Yoga. There are very few authors, I believe, who include this aspect. Yet the Hatha Yoga Pradipika clearly includes. Hatha Yoga Pradipika divides bhakti into two types. So let me write the Sanskrit words for you. This is one, and the second one is it divides bhakti, devotion, love, into two different types. One is love as a means, as a practice. Sorry, yes. Because sadhana means. Sadhana means something through which something is achieved. That is called sadhana. Sadhana is that through which one achieves something. So love and devotion as a means, as an instrument, as a practice. That is what sadhana bhakti means. And phala means fruit. Phala is the Sanskrit word for fruit. Fruit means bhakti, means love, and fruit love. These are the two distinctions that Hatha Yoga Pradipika and its commentators make in the context of bhakti, in the context of devotion, and which means one is devotion as a practice And one is that natural feeling of love that arises from within as a result of these devotional as well as other practices that Hatha Yoga Pratipika speaks of. Now, when it speaks of sadhana bhakti, which means devotion as a means, in that context, it speaks of the 9 types of bhaktis, the 9 types of devotions, of which I will just give you the translation. And these are actual devotional practices which have defined spiritual practices in India, as I said, for the last at least more than 1,500 years. And why I have this particular date in mind is because this is approximately when the Alavar and the Nayanar saints of South India, 60 of them, some of them Vaishnavas and some of them Shaivas, really pioneered the devotional traditions in South India 1,500 years ago. That is when the movement, when it doesn't mean that the practice didn't exist, but it really became like a social ground level movement and started to influence the society tremendously in the South. And from there, slowly and slowly, it then covers every part of India, and every state has their own devotional saints, devotional masters, devotional traditions, distinct from each other. The devotional traditions that you will find, for example, in Assam are very different from the ones in Gujarat, in the West. Like this it is. Yet, there is a common thread everywhere. That is the beautiful thing. So, these 9 practices was the first one, and these were things that everybody could do, everyone could do. Even the simplest of the persons of the society could do. The first one was listening, just listening to the glory of the divine. And this is what you see happens most even today in India. Whether you look at the spiritual or religious channels of this country, or most of the gatherings, religious gatherings that are seen, where people come in thousands and thousands and listen to the glories, the pastimes of either Lord Rama, or either Lord Krishna, or other different forms of the divine. So just listening, that is the first thing, shravana, the first thing. And then the second one, the second practice is kirtana. Kirtana, which means singing the glory of the divine. And that's why you can see so many great kirtan individuals who do kirtan all around the world, whether it was, for example, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ji, who brought ISKCON to different countries and brought this singing the glory of the divine into every part of the world, or whether it is some other modern well-known individuals such as K.D. Krishnadas, who is widely heard and widely listened to and does kirtan. He came here also, and he gave a performance here also. And what I liked about him is his very all-inclusive approach. And he's, by birth, he's a Jew, and so he, one of the jokes that he made here was that when people ask me about my religious identity, I say I'm a Hindu. Anyway, the American pronunciation of Hindu is sounds anyway like Hindu, and the distinction is very little. But that is kirtana. Kirtana, singing the glory of the divine. Shravana, kirtana, and then smarana. Then in one's personal life, to remember the divine name. That is what also Patanjali refers to as japa, as continuous repetition, continuous remembrance of the divine name. And in this context, if you see how mala, the rosary, was developed, evolved, it originally started by counting the names on what is known as karamala, the rosary of the hands. But then later on, as the rosary evolved in India, it was taken up by most of the religions, just with different numbers. So for example, because Islam has 99 names of God, so the Islamic rosary has 99 names, or the Hail Mary rosary of Christianity. But everybody would agree that ultimately this practice, this custom of doing the rosary originated in India. At least that is how I understand it. And that precisely in the context of smarana, in the context of remembrance. And then service is the fourth one. Service, worship, bowing down to the divine, and Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam. Yes, Archanam, worship. Vandanam, Vandana means bowing down to the divine. Archanam, Vandanam, sorry.
So service is 4 and what's 5?
Just a second, I'm also again confused. Shravana is listening. Kirtana is glorifying. That is the second one. The third one is smarana, which is remembrance. And the fourth one is serving the Lord. Serving the Lord. This includes even pilgrimage, the way the masters explain it, taking pilgrimage, visiting different temples. That is also, this is the fourth one. And the fifth one is then, sorry? Yes, service. Literally, service of the lotus feet of the Lord. And then the fifth one is worship. The sixth one is vandana, which means bowing down. And then the seventh one is the sense of servitude, which means to offer all one's actions to the divine in whatever a person does, to consider himself a humble servant of the divine will. Thy will be done, as Jesus Christ puts it, that it is just your will that is being expressed through me. So this sense of servitude, that would be the seventh one. And then the eighth one is sakhya, sense of friendliness in which there is total faith on the divine, like one would have. I don't know if it would be interesting for me to explore whether this one, the friendliness aspect, has been explored in other religions also. Does the idea of friendship with God exist in Islam and Christianity? It would be an interesting, maybe it does, maybe I'm not very aware, but it would be interesting for me. So sakhya, which means friendliness, and then ultimately total surrender, complete surrender of the limited ego, of the limited identity. These 9 practices of the devotional path, this is referred to in Hatha Yoga as sadhana bhakti, as the means, as the practice of bhakti which can be practiced as a means, as an instrument, again to reach the same yoga, to reach the same meditative state. And that is why it is called bhakti yoga. Now, phala bhakti, the state of devotion, which is the resulting state of devotion, that cannot be defined. That is a natural state of deep love, which results as a result of these practices, about which even the non-dualistic traditions which are completely committed to non-dualism are bound to say that if the sense of duality is just for the sake, is resulting from this love that one can experience for that divine, then such duality is even more beautiful than the sense of non-duality. This is what the non-dualistic traditions, who do not create a distinction, even they had to conclude. So even if it is, once the truth has been understood that there is no difference, there is supreme oneness, and yet for the sake of devotion, some sense of duality is retained, because, see, the thing is that there are these two words, love, prema, and bliss, ananda. There is very little difference between both, because love and bliss, they are two inseparable ideas. One cannot be blissful without love, and love is no love without bliss. They are inseparable, yet the non-dualist traditions prefer the word bliss, ananda, because there the sense of duality is not there. For love you need two. You need a lover and you need a beloved. For love, what is required is, and that's why even, for example, when Sufi traditions, who are again deeply non-dualistic, one of the greatest assertions by one of the greatest Sufi masters, Mansur al-Hallaj, is Ana al-Haqq, I am that supreme truth. And yet, when the Sufis speak of love, they speak in terms of duality, in terms of the lover and the beloved. The same thing we find, for example, in the most influential teaching of the medieval times, which then, even though it was completely rooted in these Upanishadic teachings, in the teachings of Vedanta, but ultimately started to be identified as a new religion later, Sikhism. When you look at its teachings, at the holy book, the teachings that are within the holy book, that if you have visited, for example, the Golden Temple, the Harmandir Sahib in Amritsar, then even there, on one side, there is this complete sense of non-duality with the divine, and then, so for example, you will find tohi, mohi, mohi, tohi, antar kaisa, kanaka, kataka, jala taranga jaisa, which means that it's a beautiful, because they have a very beautiful tradition of singing the teachings, and so this is a very beautiful song, that the difference between me and between you, and between you and between me, is like the difference that is there between water and the wave on top of that, or the difference that is there between gold and the golden jewelry. That is all the difference that is there. So on one side there is total non-difference, there is a sense of total non-duality. On the other hand, for the sake of cultivating that love and allowing those beautiful feeling of love to arise, the language of duality is also there. And I think this is really in the spirit of the Upanishads, because sometimes the Upanishadic masters speak in the language of non-duality. Most of the times they speak in the language of duality, and sometimes they also speak in the language of duality. And what the later traditions have done is that those who emphasize too much on non-duality, they emphasize too much the non-dualistic statements of the Upanishads and little bit downplay the dualistic statements, and the dualistic traditions point more to the dualistic statements and try to keep the non-dualistic statements at bay. That is what most of the traditions have tried to do. But what I find in the Advaita Vedanta tradition is this approach that, yes, the supreme truth is the non-dual reality, that consciousness cannot be divided, and therefore consciousness is one, in the same way like infinite space cannot be divided, and whatever division is there is a seemingly existent division, but still, for the sake of love, a sense of duality is even more beautiful. And they say that this sense of duality is imaginary in nature, but still it is more beautiful than the truth. Sometimes the imagination can be more beautiful, and because it allows us to... and another example that they give is that whether the beloved wife, she rests or puts her head on the chest of her beloved husband, or whether she serves like a wife. She serves her husband. In both cases, in one case she is being a servant, in the other case she's completely one and united with her husband. Both are two different ways of expressing the same love. The reality is that both are united, both are one, and they are just different expressions. And I think Hanuman, one of the greatest devotees, really the embodiment of devotion to Lord Rama, he nails it beautifully when he says that when I identify with my body, I am your servant. When I identify with my limited consciousness that is limited to this body, then I am a part of you. But when I identify with my essential nature, then I realize that I am you, and there is no difference between you and me. So the greatest servant, Hanuman, who again, in the Hatha Yoga traditions, is really, if you see, whether it was Krishnamacharya's Yogashala or as you saw yesterday, I don't know if you noticed, Guruji's center in there, they have a beautiful statue and pictures of Hanuman there. I saw it, I noticed it yesterday only. Hanuman Asana is there in the yogic traditions, who is really the embodiment of Dasya Bhakti, that aspect of Bhakti, servitude. When the greatest servant, the lowest of the low, who puts himself as the lowest of the low with that sense of servitude, even he, when he declares that, when I identify with my body, I'm just your servant. When I identify with the consciousness limited to this body, I'm a part of you. And when I identify with the true nature of consciousness, then I'm one with you. It shows how different feelings, whether the sense of duality and non-duality, they are not, at least from the perspective of Advaita Vedanta, they are not opposition in nature. Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualistic teachings, the non-dualistic aspect of Vedanta, beautifully accommodates also the dualistic views. And that is what I find very beautiful about Vedanta, that it says that all other views might be opposite to each other, but there is nothing in our teachings which opposes anyone else. So this idea of presenting a framework, an umbrella, which includes all the different seemingly opposite views into one truth, that is something unique that I find in the Vedantic traditions. So, these two aspects that Hatha Yoga Pradipika and its commentators speak of in the context of Bhakti. I just wanted to discuss a little bit about this. Any questions, any thoughts? Because we have talked a lot about Bhakti, about devotion. Any? Yes?
So how do we relate what you said today back to this?
Yes, yes, yes.
Why is it important to know this?
Yes.
And how does it help illuminate?
Yes, yes. This particular line which we were discussing, that may Brahman not negate me, it encapsulates that humble, that supplicating spirit of a devotee who is seeking non-negation in the form of grace that is being granted when he says that may Brahman not negate me, may Brahman not abandon me, may that divine not abandon me. He is living that spirit, at least in its seed form, which then because this is an extremely ancient teaching, as I said, that at least around 3,000 years old, and later on, what we find here and many other similar statements were then later on developed into a whole movement, devotional movement of Bhakti. So here, because this sentence clearly he's asking that may that divine, may that divinity which is present, about which I said that it is present within everyone, all is Brahman, all is that divine, may that divine not abandon me, may that divine not negate me, may that divine bestow its grace, which again in our previous discussion I explained, kripa in the form of that strength, that capacity, and anugraha, for which I gave the example of the kitten being picked up by its mother, that sense of complete surrender. So that anugraha, may that grace manifest in my life. This is what this prayer. So on one side, the first part, may I not negate Brahman, puts the effort on the practitioner, which is one part of the journey. And the second part of it is to allow the circumstances, the world around, to take responsibility for my uplift. As I had explained with the example of how that documentary, that very interesting documentary, in case if you have seen. Yes?
But Samantha, these are all actions.
Yes.
Everything that you said today.
Yes.
So this also, the way you're explaining it, it also seems like quite an active approach.
Yes, 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 yes. But the grace that manifests, the circumstances that are created as a result of all this, that is not an action from our side. That is, how would you call it? It is, these are actions. These are certainly actions. These are certainly
It
actions.
seems like
There
you're
is,
saying we do these actions and then we receive this grace.
Yes.
So then that also seems like
Yes.
quite an active approach.
I think even, can we say here that these actions start manifesting, in fact, only after grace manifests in our life, because they don't manifest in everyone. They don't manifest in everyone. These actions, and unless some kind of grace already has manifested, they cannot arise. So yes, there are actions. Bhakti yoga is an action. It's a very different kind of action. It cannot be equated to karma yoga. The distinction is very clearly made, as we saw in the definition of karma and in the definition of bhakti. So where does the problem lie? Where does the problem lie? I mean, where is the problem? Can you?
Well, it just seems like the first one would nirākarod, negate, brahman.
Yes.
You know, that this you explain many, many actions, and that we really need to do all of these actions and then the second one, it felt like it was more saying that this is something that happens to us, that we somehow receive.
Yes.
But this also, what you explained today, seems like a very active.
Yes. They are devotional, what I refer to as sadhana bhakti. They are very active devotional practices. But what comes as a result of this love, which is the result, that is not something that can be done, but it is a feeling that arises from within. As I said, that one cannot do something to make that love arise. That love has to arise naturally from within. And I would say that the arising of that love would be the manifestation of this grace that he's speaking about. And the second thing, that when, as a result of this constant smarana, constant remembrance, constant worship, constant listening and singing the glories of the divine, when a person does not worry about his life, but is being taken care of. And this is the kind of tremendous faith that also, for example, Krishna in the 9th chapter, towards the end in the 9th chapter, he speaks about that when he says that those people who constantly engage themselves in remembering me, in listening and singing my glory, I fully take care of their yoga and kshema. Yoga means I fully take care of what they need, first of all, so I provide them their needs, and I take care of what they have. I protect that. So they don't have to worry about it. So the world, the society, whatever you want to call it, the universe, the nature, then completely takes care of such a person. So all this would be not what he cannot do, what a practitioner cannot do, but what the circumstances enable him to do, that aspect. So in other words, I have done my best, but now I'm asking the circumstances to be favorable towards this goal of yoga. That is what devotion, that is what surrender is about. This doesn't mean that surrender is not active. From the part of the practitioner, it is tremendously active. He has to do a lot. That is what karma yoga, that is what even this aspect of bhakti was about. But then as a result of that, when the circumstances become favorable, and we actually start feeling that in our life, that is something beyond our capacity. When we actually feel that the ladder has been given to us to climb up, whether it is the form of other human beings, whether it is in the form of a good teacher, whether it is in the form, it can be in so many different forms, but which is where we have done nothing, but it just happens. So it is that aspect that he is seeking, and this in karma yoga, there is still this sense of doing, while in bhakti there is this sense of total surrender. So it is that difference which is there. In karma yoga it is still, one is taking full responsibility for one's actions. And in bhakti, the shift is more towards completely giving up that sense of responsibility for what I am doing. So, does that clarify or it doesn't?
No, I mean, I'm just...
No, but yeah. Okay.
The way you described duality
Yes.
in Hanuman's explanation of consciousness, is that synonymous with Patanjali's description of nirbija and sabija samadhi and the other samadhi?
Again, please. What's the question? What is related to nirbija and sabija?
So we were talking about duality, right?
Yes.
And you described very nicely how Hanumana describes when he's in complete union with the divine, right? It sounded a little bit similar to Patanjali's description of sabija, samadhi, the other samadhi, and then nirbija samadhi. Can there be a parallel?
There is clearly a parallel between sabija and little bit difficult with nirbija, because in nirbija there is no thought at all. There is just a pure being. The mind is no more active. So to find a parallel between nirbija is difficult, but in fact, in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, coming back to the discussion that I was saying, is that phala bhakti, what Hatha Yoga Pradipika refers to as phala bhakti, is squarely equated to what is known as samprajñāta samadhi, or what you referred to as sabija samadhi in Patanjali's understanding. So it is completely equated. So it's not, I'm not equating it, but Brahmananda in his commentary I just didn't speak of it because sabija, and then I would have to explain sabija and samprajñāta and all those terms. But since you are already familiar, so I'm just making this point that phala bhakti, while sadhana bhakti is equated to Ishvara pranidhana of the first chapter, karma yoga we equated with Ishvara pranidhana of the second chapter. Sadhana bhakti we will equate with Ishvara pranidhana of the first chapter, and phala bhakti we have to equate. It is equated by the Hatha Yoga masters with samprajñāta samadhi. In fact, specifically the sananda samprajñāta samadhi, the deeply blissful samprajñāta samadhi, the fourth one, because there are 4 stages of samprajñāta samadhi. So the fourth one is completely related to phala bhakti.
And in turn, non-dualism.
Sorry?
And in turn, non-duality.
Yes. In?
Non-duality.
Yeah, in turn. What did you say?
Oh, in turn. And hence.
Yeah. Yes. This Patanjali is a dualist. Keep that in mind.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, thank you. Sorry, and what was the Sanskrit word for service? You talked about pilgrimage and service, and then worship.
Dasya.
Dasya.
It comes from dasa. Dasa, servant, and dasya is the state of servitude. And this I think as a practice, it is to evolve complete humbleness. And that's why you see, for example, in all the devotional traditions, when you get initiated, the surname that you get in the devotional traditions, in the Advaita Vedantic traditions, you get the surname Swami. That's the surname. Swami means master, Lord, king. And in the devotional traditions, you get the surname Dasa. Always Dasa. Dasa means servant.
And the Sanskrit for worship?
Sorry?
The Sanskrit for worship?
For worship, either it is Archana, there are two types of worships, Archana and Vandana. Archana is ritualistic worship and Vandana is simply complete bowing down. So when I bow down, then it is Vandana. So Archana, Puja, generally what we call. Puja includes both, but here the distinction is made between Archana. Archana is the Shodashopachara Puja, the 16 methods of worshipping the divine, which are nothing but engaging all the most beautiful sense objects, the beautiful smells, aromas and tastes and every aspect is being used to worship and welcome the divinity. So that and then bowing down, that is Vandana. Yes.
told me the first is sadhana bhakti and then is phala bhakti. Yes. So sadhana bhakti can be connected with the asana practice that every day we're doing our sadhana, and then phala is coming because of the whatever we get, and then is a strength or whatever. So that's why the second step is the phala.
Is the result. Yes.
And then I'm always have a doubt for Haṭha.
Of
Haṭha.
Haṭha,
What is
yes.
a Haṭha? Because in Hindi means Haṭha means like a
Push, force.
No. Haṭha means hat karna.
Hat karna, yeah. In Hindi,
You know the Hindi
yes,
speaker
the Hindi
always said
meaning.
hat karna. So I'm always thinking like we have that kind of the idea that
Yes.
we can do this thing, and that's why it's Haṭha yoga.
Yes.
Maybe with the Haṭha, maybe with the strong way. So this is my idea from long time, but when I study with you, it's changed a little bit. I feel it is different. No, my idea is different for Haṭha yoga.
Yes.
Earlier when I start yoga, but later I understood. But still, sometimes I feel the yogis are still doing a Haṭha. They have nothing, but they really do. I don't know what is Haṭha in English. Haṭha.
Maybe stubbornness.
Stubbornness. Yes.
Stubbornness.
So sometimes
Stubborn like a mule.
Yes.
Yes.
So like no, I will achieve this thing. I will do Sirsasana in 2 days. So this kind of Haṭha is like a Haṭha yoga.
Yeah.
You know. So
Yeah.
this is my approach in earlier, but now can you clear this?
Yeah. I can only say what Hatha Yoga Pradipika explains in the beginning. When it explains Hatha Yoga, it explains it in very simple terms that Ha is prana and Tha is apana. And it is the yoga, the union of both in pranayama, in kumbhaka pranayama, when prana, as earlier when we were studying this mantra, I explained that prana and apana means exhalation and inhalation. So the union of exhalation and inhalation takes place in kumbhaka pranayama, and the complete focus of Hatha Yoga is in fact pranayama. Pranayama is its really central practice. Everything revolves around the practice of pranayama. So much so that various Hatha Yoga texts, such as, for example, Yoga Yajnavalkya, again a text on Hatha Yoga by Sage Yajnavalkya, explains how pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, they are nothing but just deeper stages of perfection in pranayama itself. So pranayama is really the central practice in Hatha Yoga. And that's what Hatha Yoga simply means, pranayama, the union of hum and tham. These two bija mantras which refer to the inhalation and exhalation, the union of these two. So that is the understanding that the Hatha Yogic masters give in their teachings. Whatever else is most likely, it would be interesting to see how the word Hatha I would would have to look at the etymological derivation of the Hindi word Haṭha and see from where it has come. Haṭhat karena. It exists also in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit it exists. To do something forcefully.
Because I saw one documentary, and he's a good teacher, I don't know what this teacher name, but he explained also this Haṭha thing in Hindi word and the Haṭha yoga. So they met together this word. So
Yes.
that's this idea in my mind.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there is certainly, I mean, when I look at, for example, the Sanskrit usage of the word Haṭha, for example, when I Haṭhat karena karoti, which means he does it forcefully. So even if he's not willing to do it, or even if then you force. So there is certainly some element of being a little bit forceful with one's body, with one's breath, in the practice of Hatha Yoga, which means in the practice of asana and in the practice of pranayama. So that aspect is there. So even that Sanskrit meaning of the word Hatha itself can make sense.
So we can do in beginning Hatha, and then we can do sadhana, then we can do phala, this all
Yes.
kind of thing. So first
Yes.
from Hatha we can start.
Yes. That's why the first step here also in the three yogas is always karma. Because first of all, to remove that laziness, to remove that negligence, first of all, tremendous effort just to wake oneself a little bit. Tremendous effort is required. Otherwise, whatever we do, otherwise our surrender also should not become completely tamasic in nature. It should be after all the efforts that we have made. That's why the example that I gave of the kitten and the cat and the monkey should not be misunderstood. Because otherwise, if you think that somebody who is making an effort is like a monkey, and the one who is not making any effort is like a kitten, and when I say that the kitten is greater than the monkey, then it would lead to tremendous misunderstanding. Simply there what I meant was that there is, despite doing everything, there is no sense of doership. And as long as even a little bit of sense of doership, despite all our efforts, even a little bit of sense of doership is there, we are still a monkey. We are surrendering, but if I think I am surrendering, if the sense of doership is there, then we are still falling into the monkey aspect. But despite all this effort, when the sense of doership decreases, when what Krishna says that ahankara vimudhatma kartahamiti manyate, as long as a person is deluded by this limited sense identity, he thinks himself that I am a doer. But when he raises above it, then what does he say in the 5th chapter? Naham karomiti. I don't remember now. Have I somewhere maybe in my notes? Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit. Someone who has seen the essence despite doing everything. And Krishna gives a long list of everything that he does. And despite doing all this, naiva kinchit karomiti, he lives in the sense that I am not doing anything. Everything is simply happening through me. So then he falls into that example of the kitten. So the other day when you asked me that question at the end, I still struggled with it. Yeah, I felt that I was not clear enough in stating this.
And I concluded after long deliberation, that internal deliberation, that actually they are not mutually exclusive or hierarchical. Actually, they are completely complementary. Because the non-doership or non-egoistic doing your best then results in leaving the rest to the divine, which is ultimate surrender. No?
Yes, that is precisely how it has to be understood. To do one's best and may I not negate Brahman, to do my best in leading my life in such a way so that nothing, no thought, no word, no deed shows in any way that I'm negating Brahman. And after that, may the divine not negate me. So I've done my best. Now, may the divine not negate me. This is what encompasses bhakti, in which we leave everything, despite all these practices, we leave everything into the hand of the divine. Despite all these practices, the tendency is to leave everything in the hands of the divine. So it is that spirit of bhakti which this part of the mantra, may Brahman not negate me, embodies in itself. So that is the unique spirit of bhakti. So let us conclude, and we'll continue the study of this mantra on Tuesday again. And then the intensive course will start. So on Tuesday there will be only beginners class, no general classes. But this will continue as usual. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः।